Hello, 153rd Airlift Wing. Welcome to Virtual Drill. I'm your Wing First Sergeant, Senior Master Sergeant Dave Sutter. We're going to take this time to accomplish your annual requirement for a family care plan briefing. I'm coming to you from my kitchen table in my modified Virtual Drill uniform. I hope you're also watching this from the comfort of your home in your modified uniform of the day as well. Before we start talking about family care plans, I'd be remiss as a First Sergeant if I take just a moment to address the current environment we find ourselves in. During this drill weekend, please get in contact with your wingmen. Reach out to one another and see how everybody's doing. Do this in whatever communication medium that you find the best suited. It's not easy for any of us to be so isolated from our friends and family. Take care of yourselves and reach out to each other. I know this, and I know you hear it a lot, but it's worth mentioning here because it's true. We have resources out there for you. If you're dealing with something, whether that something is navigating the loss of a job, dealing with depression, or some other financial or life need, get a hold of your supervisor, your first sergeant, your chief, or your commander. Don't suffer in silence. We're here to help you. So with that, let's jump into our family care plans. All right, let's jump right into it then. Once again, I am Senior Master Sergeant David Sutter, your Wing First Sergeant for the 153rd Airlift Wing. This is your required annual briefing on family care plans, and our reference for this training is listed here, and of course can be found in the e-publishing section of the Air Force portal. So with that, let's start unlocking the hidden secrets of a mystical family care plan. So what is a family care plan anyway? Well, basically, it's a collection of documents detailing a specific plan for a military member's dependent or dependents that can be used when that member must be absent from home for a required military duty. It includes things such as the following outlined here: legal, like powers of attorney, medical, such as who the primary care provider is, logistical, just getting things around, getting the child around to and from school, financial considerations, do they have the money that they need available to them, religious, and so on. And then finally, the plan has to be both comprehensive and realistic to implement on short notice, and it needs to be able to cover both short-term and long-term absences of the member from their dependent. Okay, so when would you need to enact your family care plan? Well, there's a variety of reasons. Could be an exercise that's outside the local area. Could be a short notice alert that happened, extended duty hours, obviously deployment, PCS, PCA, basically any military obligation that's going to require you to be away from your dependent for a period of time where someone else would need to take that responsibility. Okay, so what are your responsibilities as a member? Well, the instruction says that all Air Force members with dependent family members will have family care arrangements that reasonably cover situations that you will be absent. So basically it's saying that as a member, you're responsible for any of your family members' needs while you might be away for any reason. Failure to have a plan in place is subject to disciplinary action according to the DODIs listed here. So what does it mean? Okay, so great. So we covered that all members of the military with dependent family members need to have a plan in place to take care of those dependent family members when you get called away to duty for a period of time. So now what we're going to talk about is those members that require an official family care plan to be on file with the first sergeant and commander. Okay, so number one, single parents that have sole or joint custody of a child under the age of 19 or are caring for somebody else. This would be such as like a grandparent or somebody who's disabled that lives with you that needs to have care provided to them in your absence. All right, number two, dual military couples with dependents. So if you are if you are married to another member of the armed forces, doesn't matter which branch, doesn't matter active, reserve, guard, if you're married to another military member and you have a child together, you are both required to have a family care plan in place. All right, so if you are married, but you have custody or joint custody of a child, and your spouse is not that person's biological or adoptive parent, then you require one to be on file. And this one gets the most questions. What I would say with this one is read these bullets, and if you have a question about it, get with your squadron first sergeant, and they'll be able to help you out to identify whether or not you need to have one of these plans on file. Primary responsible for dependent family members, again, this would cover somebody that is physically or mentally handicapped to where they couldn't take care of themselves if you weren't there. And then finally, civilian employees and contractor personnel in emergency essential positions. So there they all are. Take a look at them. And if you have any questions, please get with your first sergeant and they will be able to help you understand whether or not you need to have an official family care plan on file. Completion timelines. There's different completion timelines once you are aware that you need to have an official family care plan on file. For active duty, and in our case, mostly AGR, you have 60 days from the time the first sergeant notifies you or you understand that you need the family care plan to go ahead and get it in place with your first sergeant. DSGs have 90 days to go ahead and get one in place. So if you have a child or if you get divorced in such a way that's going to require you to have a family care plan in place, those are your timelines. We'll recertify your family care plan, meaning you'll sit down with the first sergeant or commander on an annual basis to make sure that your family care plan is still current and still has the correct designees and documents in place. And then, of course, again, this is all subject. Failure to observe these regulations is a violation of Article 92 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. All right, so here's some considerations for you when you might need to update a family care plan or otherwise create a family care plan because of personal status change. So birth or adoption of a child, if you lose a spouse through death or separation or most commonly divorce, if your spouse ends up, and you have a dependent family member, of course, if your spouse ends up enlisting or commissioning in the military, then you become a dual military couple with the dependents, and it's time to open a family care plan. If, like we talked about before, your grandparent or a disabled family member needs to move in with you and is now reliant on you as a sole care provider, you need to open up a family care plan. If your spouse ends up having to make a career change where they work across state lines or otherwise not with you, and you are responsible for the dependent family members, then time to come open up a family care plan. And then finally, like we talked about, if you need to complete a family care plan, change anything in it because you moved, recertify on an annual basis with the first sergeant, any of those types of things are changes. If you don't know or you're unsure, just get with your squadron first sergeant and they will definitely be able to help you out and let you know if you need to open up a family care plan or otherwise amend one that you have in place. All right, so what we're really talking about in this slide is making sure that you have the conversation with the person that's going to be the caregiver for your dependent while you're away on the important documents and things that they may come across that your dependent's going to need while you're gone. We'll touch on them in a little more detail later in the slideshow, but the basics of it are listed here in these bullet points. One thing I'll definitely call out is make sure from the community support piece that your caregiver or spouse knows that they can count on the 153rd to provide resources to them if they get into any kind of situation. Don't hesitate to contact your key spouse, your first sergeant, commanders, anybody in that chain of command would be very happy to help and reach out to these caregivers in your absence, and rest assured your family's going to be taken care of. So if you do need to have an official family care plan on file, then there's 3 documents basically that will need to go into it. One is your Air Force Form 357, which we'll go into more detail here in just a moment. If you want to work on that form during your virtual drill, you can pull that down off of the EPUB's site on the Air Force portal. Second, there's some information that's required of you to put in and fill out about your dependent for your caregiver to utilize while you're gone. We have a locally developed form that we use that we call the Family Care Dependent Information Form. One of these will need to be filled out for each dependent family member that you have. And finally, you'll need a POA or a power of attorney. This is a powerful legal document that gives the caregiver the authority to act on your behalf while you're not available. The POA can be obtained through our legal office, and typically it's just a walk-in. You can come in and a paralegal or JA can help you fill one out. But during virtual drill, go ahead and call ahead and ask them how they're proceeding with that. All right. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and just review a little bit. This is the Air Force Form 357, just a snippet of it. Section 1 is going to outline your obligations as the member, knowing that you are required to have a family care plan in place. You've been identified by the first sergeant, yourself, or otherwise, and these are your member certification. So you're going to sign at the bottom here and date it, saying that you understand these principles that are listed out here. And I'm not going to go over each one of them. If you need one, you can read it and sign. All right. So there's 3 types of designated caregivers that the military is going to ask you to put on here. So there's the temporary custodian, which is someone that is going to be very close by in the local area that you're going to be able to go ahead and hand off your dependent to, your child or your grandparent, and they're going to be able to go ahead and take them in right away and start caring for them while you get out of town and do what you need to do for the military. This person can be a military member and they need to reside in the local area. Then you have the short-term caregiver. The short-term caregiver also needs to reside in the local vicinity, and if you're wondering what local vicinity is defined at, get with your first sergeants or your squadron commanders. They define, the commanders define local vicinity in these cases. This member can also, or this person can also be a military member if you'd like. And short-term versus temporary basically is this person could maybe not come up, in the first couple hours and grab your dependent member while you get out of town, but they could be there to hang on to them and take care of them for a couple weeks or something like that once the initial handoff is made to the temporary care provider. And then finally, you have your long-term care provider. And this person, caregiver, I should say, is going to be someone that you're going to entrust your dependents with, say if you go on a deployment for 2 months or 6 months or something like that, and this person can sustain your family member for that long period of time. They don't have to reside within the local vicinity. We live in Wyoming. If your parents or whoever you make your caregiver reside in Florida, for instance, that would be just fine. The point of the first 2 is that you can quickly hand off and move into your military duty, and then also have a long-term plan in place to provide for your dependents. Now, there's 3 slots here. You could have the same individual in all 3 slots. They could, if it's your mom that lives in Cheyenne, Wyoming, we'll assume you're living in Cheyenne, Wyoming, then she could be the temporary, she could be the short-term, and she could be the long-term care provider for your dependent. That's absolutely fine. There's just 3 options there to cover all the bases, and you'll review that with your first sergeant when you're filling out this document. All right, section 4 here for dual. This is only if you're mill to mill, basically dual military couples. There's a line here for your spouse to go ahead and endorse the family care plan just like you endorsed it on the front. So you might be wondering what happened to section 3. We skipped from section 2 to 4. 3 doesn't apply to us. That's for, I think, non-combatant evacuation OCONUS type of stuff, which isn't going to be us in this case. So On the 4 dual military families members, this is where your spouse will endorse it, and the first sergeant or commander will endorse it as well, saying, yeah, it's going to work for both of y'all during an event. Okay, now on to section 5 and 6. This is where the commander, or typically the first sergeant, goes ahead and reviews the plan with you, this form as well as the other documents we've talked about, and says, yep, you're good to go. They go ahead and sign it. And then there's an annual, like we spoke about before, recertification part there, to where we're going to go ahead and review it on an annual basis with the individual member, we being the first sergeants, and say, yep, the plan still works and we don't need to make any changes to it here, so we'll just re-sign this form. And then there's a remarks section below that, which we will document the required information on your dependent family member. Okay, so what other considerations are there for building a family care plan, whether official or not official, just the one that you're going to keep and be ready to implement in the event that you go out the door and your spouse or your caregiver that's listed need to take up the mantle and help out with the dependent. So there's medical is a big one. And the top one here, I can't stress it enough, make sure that your dependent is enrolled in DEERS. Get with the Force Support Squadron, make sure, because this will affect entitlements. This will affect benefits that your dependent family member will have. This will affect your paycheck. All sorts of implications for being or not being enrolled in DEERS that you should consider. Does your spouse or doesn't he know where the family member's medical records are kept? So if you're not or if you are the person in the house that typically kind of manages that piece of it, make sure that the caregiver or your spouse know where you're keeping it at, that they know who you use as your primary care provider, who you prefer that your dependents go see in the event they need some medical assistance. And then, do they know how to use TRICARE? If you're going on to active duty, whether Title 32 or Title 10 orders, they need to understand how to use and navigate that system, which isn't always easy. There's resources out there, but make sure they understand what the TRICARE program covers and a basic understanding of how to use it. Okay, financial considerations. So, have you left your spouse or your designee with information on how to get a hold of funds if they need to, or have you left them with an allotment of funds? Are they connected and plugged into how they're going to pay for different activities, food, rent, all those types of things that happen that still go on while you're gone, car payments, all those types of things. They need to understand what the plan is to keep up with those in your absence. Make sure that that whatever arrangement you work out with this individual, whether it be your spouse or designee, works for both of you, and that they have the authorized access that they may need to get into certain accounts. And if you have any questions on something like that, we have a fantastic financial counselor available, free at no cost, that could review some of the options for you in that case. So let's talk about some important documents here that you want to make sure that aren't buried in a pile of messy paperwork in the attic or whatever, in case they may need them. So here's kind of a not all inclusive, but a pretty good list of things that your spouse or designee, your caregiver for your dependent, may need while you're gone. So it's a good idea to collect all these marriage certificates, birth certificates, IDs, definitely the power of attorney, wills, social security cards, insurance documents, banking, credit card information, citizenship paperwork, any other documents that it could be feasible that they might need while you're gone. It's a good idea to go ahead and have it pulled out in one comprehensive, I would call it a continuity binder, or in one of those little home personal safes or whatever, where you keep all your important documents. Have them kind of well organized and let them know where they're at, and make sure they have access to them in case they need to get in there and act on your behalf for your dependent. Okay, well, that concludes your annual briefing on family care plans as required by the DODI. If you find you have any questions coming out of this briefing, go ahead and contact your first sergeant for your squadron, and they will be able to answer any questions that you might have on whether you need an official family care plan or if you just need some advice, some tips, you're getting ready to deploy or head out on some training and be away from home for an extended period of time. Your first sergeant is a great person to contact to go ahead and get some advice and help in developing those types of plans. And with that, I hope everybody has a fantastic Air National Guard virtual drill. We'll talk to you guys next time. Reach out to me if I can help you with anything. This is Senior Master Sergeant David Sutter, your Wing First Sergeant, signing off.